A scream in West Cork. The murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier, Part 1. Welcome to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. For World Cold Case Thursday, we travel beyond our borders to explore mysteries that have haunted communities across the globe. Cases where justice remains elusive and the truth stubbornly hidden. Today we journey to the rugged, beautiful, and sometimes wild landscape of West Cork, Ireland, to unravel one of the most infamous and perplexing unsolved murders in recent memory. The brutal killing of French film producer Sophie Toscan du Plantier. A case that has captivated and frustrated investigators, legal systems, and the public for nearly 3 decades. The idyllic retreat, the horrific discovery, and the initial investigation. Our story begins with Sophie Toscan du Plantier, born Sophie Buinel, on July 28, 1957 in Paris, France. A woman of elegance, intellect, and creativity, Sophie was a respected documentary filmmaker. At 39 years old, she was a mother to a teenage son, Pierre-Louis, from her first marriage, and wife to acclaimed French film producer Daniel Toscan du Plantier. Despite her demanding career and her life in the bustling cultural heart of Paris, Sophie yearned for a different kind of solace. Since her teenage years, when she'd spent time on a language exchange, Sophie had developed a deep affection for Ireland. It was this affinity that drew her to the remote, enchanting landscape of West Cork, specifically the townland of Tourmoor near Schull, a small picturesque village nestled on the scenic Midson Peninsula. In 1993, she purchased a holiday cottage there, a simple, isolated home without central heating, but offering breathtaking views of the wild Atlantic coast. It was her escape, a place where she could write, find peace, and reconnect with nature, often visiting alone. The Christmas of 1996 was fast approaching. Sophie had planned a quiet retreat to her Irish cottage before returning to Paris to spend holidays with her family. On Friday, December 20, 1996, Sophie arrived alone in West Cork. The days leading up to her death saw her engaging in mundane tasks and enjoying the quiet charm of the area. She was seen in local shops, including the Spar supermarket in Schull, seemingly preparing for a peaceful Christmas. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic setting, an unimaginable horror was about to unfold. The last confirmed sighting of Sophie alive was on Sunday, December 22nd, 1996. She was walking in the local area, her familiar blonde hair a beacon against the gray Irish sky. That evening, she reportedly made a phone call from her cottage to a friend in France. The details of this call, and any other final communications, have been subject to intense scrutiny in the years that followed, as investigators tried to piece together her last hours. The morning of Monday, December 23, 1996, dawned cold and raw in Tourmoor. At approximately 10 o'clock a.m., Sophie's nearest neighbor, Shirley Foster, was driving along the narrow winding boreen, a small country road that led to Sophie's property. As she passed Sophie's gate, something caught her eye. Lying in the laneway, partially obscured by bushes and a stone wall, was a figure. At first glance, Foster initially thought it might be a mannequin or perhaps a discarded sack of potatoes. But as she drove closer, a chilling realization dawned upon her. It was a body. The figure was dressed in nightwear, long johns and a white nightshirt, along with boots. Her long johns were caught in a barbed wire fence beside the gateway. The scene was immediately horribly clear. This was not an accident. The sheer brutality of the injuries left Foster no doubt that she had stumbled upon a murder. Foster immediately raised the alarm, contacting her partner, Alfie Lyons. Lyons in turn alerted an Gardaí Soshana, the Irish police force, at the local Bantry Garda station. The news of a murder in such a tranquil, tight-knit community sent shockwaves through West Cork. This was an unprecedented event, the last murder in the area being decades prior. The initial response from local Gardaí was swift, But as the scale of the crime became apparent, the limitations of rural policing in handling a homicide of this magnitude began to emerge. When Gardaí arrived at the scene, they confirmed Shirley Foster's horrific discovery. The body was indeed that of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Her face was severely disfigured from blunt force trauma, so much so that initial identification was difficult. Near her body, a blood-spattered concrete block and a piece of slate were found, believed to be the weapons used in the attack. Bloodstains were also observed on a nearby gate, suggesting a struggle had taken place. Up next, the initial Garda investigation and critical challenges. The initial Garda investigation and critical challenges. The arrival of local Gardaí at the scene marked the beginning of a complex and at times controversial investigation. The officer in charge of the initial scene was Sergeant Philomena McCarthy from Schule Garda Station. The severity of the crime immediately triggered a wider response. Detective Inspector Liam Hodnett from Bantry was assigned as a senior investigating officer. One of the first and most critical issues that arose, and which would later become a major point of contention, was the preservation of the crime scene. Due to the remote location, the lack of immediate specialized forensic units in rural West Cork and the Christmas period, took an agonizingly long time for forensic teams and the state pathologist, Dr. John Harbison, to arrive from Dublin. For an estimated 28 hours, Sophie's body remained exposed to the elements at the scene. This extended exposure meant the scene was subject to the harsh December weather, potentially compromising crucial forensic evidence, including bloodstains, fingerprints, and fibers. The initial Gardaí present also lacked the specialized training and equipment for advanced crime scene preservation, leading to allegations that the scene may not have been fully secured or properly handled from the outset. Local residents and even Gardaí themselves walked around the scene, some unknowingly, before it was officially sealed off. When Dr. Harbison finally conducted his post-mortem examination at the scene, he determined that Sophie had died from laceration and swelling of the brain, fracture of the skull, and multiple blunt head injuries. The ferocity of the attack indicated an extremely violent assault. Her injuries suggested she had put up a significant struggle. As the news spread, the small community of West Cork was plunged into a state of shock and fear. The immediate priority for the Gardaí was to establish a motive and identify potential suspects. Initial lines of inquiry naturally focused on those closest to Sophie or anyone who might have had a reason to harm her. They began interviewing neighbors, shopkeepers, and anyone who had seen Sophie in the days leading up to her death. Telephone records from Sophie's cottage were immediately sought. These records would show who she had spoken to in her final hours and might provide clues about her state of mind or any visitors she might have been expecting. At the same time, Gardaí suggested canvassing the area, looking for any unusual sightings, vehicles or individuals. They appealed to the public for information, asking anyone who would be in the Toormore area on the night of December 22nd or the morning of December 23rd to come forward. The murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier is now officially a major homicide investigation. The serene beauty of West Cork is being shattered by an act of horrific violence. The eyes of Ireland, and soon France, will turn to this quiet corner of the country, demanding answers that will be decades in the making. In the next part of this series, we will delve deeper into the early days of the investigation, key witnesses who came forward, and the emergence of a highly unusual figure who would soon become central to the mystery, local freelance journalist Ian Bailey. Because every case deserves answers, and every victim deserves justice. Subscribe now to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Episodes available wherever you get your podcasts.